Who's ready for a trip down memory lane? I know I am. We're going to talk about Dead Space. And I'm going to go all the way back to 2006, I think it is, and kind of go from the beginning to the end for the first Dead Space. The second one was an entirely different ordeal. But I thought it would be fun to start from the beginning and kind of rediscover some of these things together, because it's been, I don't know, at least 10 years since I've looked at any of this stuff. And honestly, I don't have a lot of memory about how it all happened. It's a bit of a blur. So, without further ado, why don't we talk about how I got the job? So many things flooding my brain. So EA was doing a new game, and they had a small team of people that were just working on Dead Space. And I think they were working on it for about a year before they started to talk about music. And this was maybe 2 years before the game even came out. So the game came out in 2008. This is back in 2006, like early to mid 2006. My agent at the time called, and they were just asking for demos. And there wasn't a whole lot of direction aside from they wanted something scary, and they wanted it to be like psychologically, unsettling. So I put together some demos, which I have in a folder over here. And by the way, since we're doing Dead Space stuff, I'm going to have some wonderful goodies on Patreon after each one of these episodes. If I can figure out what they're going to be, I'll talk about them ahead of time. Otherwise, I'll just put the links in the description of what is in Patreon in the description for the video, because this is literally this channel. If you haven't realized it yet, if this is your first time to Audio Arc, welcome. And this is me flying by the seat of my pants when I have spare time to do things. And lately it's been doing a lot of videos all at once, and that's what we're going to do with Dead Space today. So I did find some examples of the audio tracks that I sent in that are dated like 2006. So I'll have these on the Patreon site. You can download them and listen to them on their own, but I thought it would be fun to go ahead and play through some of them now. Yeah, I remember this. That pretty much sounds kind of like the way Dead Space was eventually. That was called Boo. Here's another one called Boo 2. All right. This is Creepy 02. I think I did 3 things that were called Boo that were shorter, 3 things that were called Creepy, and then an electronica thing, because they weren't sure if they wanted it to be modern or kind of sort of timeless. They were also debating some sort of heavy metal guitar things. This is Creepy 02. It's obviously MIDI. Yeah. So, and all of these were custom things that I put together for the Dead Space pitch itself. And I know one of the things that they did specify sort of as a target palette was The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which is by Christopher Young, which I knew very, very well. And he was actually working on that right after I got out of school in Los Angeles. And I have the score. Actually, a funny Chris Young story. He taught, and he probably still teaches at USC. But I, in the normal, over-exuberant, youthful, and energetic, starving for knowledge sort of student, went up after the very first class and introduced myself and told them how excited I was. And I don't really remember what I said, but the next class at the end, I think it was every 2 weeks maybe, or once a week with him, I went up again and said something, and he had brought me a score. And he said, everything you need to know, and I won't do Chris's voice. He sounds like he's been smoking for 180 years, but he said, everything you need to know, because we were talking about scary music in his class, go figure, is everything you need to know about horror music is in the score. And he handed me his own personal copy of the conductor score to Alien, which I immediately photocopied the entire thing and brought it back the following week. But that was sort of my touch point in my head for doing some of these demos for Dead Space, simply because it was the most Hollywood kind of sounding scary music that I knew. So I was sort of going back to that idea of tone clusters and the way Goldsmith uses harmony, so to speak, in Alien when I was doing some of these demos. This is Creepy 03, which, if memory serves, yeah. So these were all MIDI, which wasn't easy back in 2006 because you literally had samplers. I think I had 3 EMU samplers with 128 gigabytes of megabytes, 128 megabytes of RAM in each one, with all my orchestra sounds kind of truncated and made as small as I could get to fit as many different sounds into the samplers as possible. So this piece, which I wrote for the demo, ended up being kind of the main theme from Dead Space. I think it was called Dead Space Main Theme or something like that. It was kind of extrapolated and extended, but that was Creepy 03 was what it was originally called, and that's how long it was. UPS delivery. Where were we? The main theme. Yes, that became the main theme for the first Dead Space, which was really cool, knowing that something that I kind of put together on its own ended up being the final version of the game. And then this is just called Electronica, which, being 13 years old, is probably going to be very, very dated. Yeah. This is like the modern version of scary music back in 2006. Yeah, there you go. So that was essentially maybe 2 other tracks that I also sent, but we sent those in, and the audio director called almost immediately and was like, this is exactly what we need. No one else seems to get it. Obviously, you've done this before, or you have some sort of experience with it, because it sounds very much like the sort of universe that we want to play in with the music for the game. And I was like, well, great, cool. Why don't we get started? So we did music, like MIDI-based music, and I would write stuff and send it into him, and he would put it in the game. And they're really, I don't know about from their side of things, but from my side of things, there wasn't like a big, okay, well, we're going to have a recording session and go record all this live or anything like that. It was still trying to find the sound of the game, because a lot of folks apparently were pushing for that more electronica kind of thing, and maybe even, like I said before, some heavy metal, sort of heavy guitars sort of a thing, and weren't necessarily 100% on board with the scary orchestra. So there was some things that that I wrote in the first version of kind of round of music that never actually made it into the game. So here are 2 of the tracks that were combat tracks in the kind of the first version of Dead Space that never made it into the final game. This is excitingly titled Battle Demo 1. So it's like it's got some of those frenetic elements, but obviously kind of crossed with more modern 15 years ago kinds of sounds. And again, this is all MIDI, so any clusters and things, you know, I'm putting them on the keyboard and like playing groups of clusters. Yeah, I remember this one. I know it's mono, I'm sorry, that was just how I found the demo version. So the general idea was there was maybe 18 or 20 minutes of music like this that was produced, and then 3 or 4 months where we didn't hear from anybody. And then Don Vecca, who was the audio director, came back and said, change of plans. We're not going to go with the modern kind of edge. It's too comforting and, you know, makes the player feel like they're going to succeed, which is what they said that they wanted. They wanted to be tinged with scariness, but also have forward motion and kind of a empowering sort of feel. Like if Will Smith were in a sci-fi horror action kind of movie, that's what we were going for. In my head, it was sort of like, what was that movie? iRobot. Like if iRobot were a horror movie, it would have that kind of a score. So this time Don said, you know, we're not going to use any of that stuff. We're just going to go for whatever's the scariest music that you can write. Like the scariest music that's ever been written in the history of the world. That's what we want in the score. We want it to completely terrify everybody and make them just so incredibly scared when they're walking down a hallway and don't see anything that even if a fluffy bunny rabbit jumps out at the end of the hallway, they're still going to scream and be terrified because the music has built up that hallway walk so much. Like the tension is really, really palpable. So that was kind of where everything changed. And that was the stuff that you hear in the final version of the game. So I think what I'm going to do is wrap that up there, and then in the next one, we'll talk about where we actually started working together, getting the music for Dead Space to everything that you hear in the final game.